Hello, I am Lalnundika Darlong, a final year student at SRCC, and I quite enjoy masala chai.
Hi, I'm Aayam. I'm also a final year student of BCom Honors at SRCC, and I really like coffee. We'll be talking about EY CAFTA, the case competition today, and I'll start by talking a bit about the structure of the competition. So it starts off with the registration, where you're required to choose one of the couple of streams that are presented, and there are a couple of mentorship sessions spread throughout the duration of the competition. But ultimately, in terms of the core rounds itself, it can be divided into three, let's say, one being a qualifying quiz in nature, then a case submission round, and finally, for the top 5 teams, a presentation round.
This was my second case competition, and in terms of the overall experience, it wasn't that hectic, but it was an incredibly enriching and rewarding experience. Now, whether that was in terms of the little perks that we got directly through the competition, or whether that was through the mentorship and the networking opportunities that we got, it has been quite a phenomenal opportunity because it's gotten us a lot of recognition, either whether it was from the batch, fellow students from our college or other students in other colleges, or even a few company people across a lot of industries, because they recognize the sector, which is finance, but also treasury in particular. So that was quite a fun experience to have.
So for us, we really known each other already in college, and we done a couple of projects together, which is why we decided to team up for this competition. But as far as advice goes, we would really recommend people to be careful of the team to select. At least in our time, the max team size was of 2 members, and when you're that low on manpower, it becomes really important on having complementary skill sets so that the team can shine through very well. This competition in particular is rather research heavy. So for example, in our case, Nandika was able to cover a lot of the research and data finding aspects, while I was able to emphasize a lot more on overall structuring, visualization, and interpretation of the information we collected.
When it comes to stream selection, we had the payment architecture stream, which was a little niche during our time. And it was quite niche in comparison to things such as ESG or AI. Now, when it comes to your stream selection, we would say there are 3 things you can consider under an individual category. So firstly, it would be your personal objective. Is your objective to add this to your CV after winning it? Or is your objective to learn something out of it and gain something for the long run? Another thing to consider is your interest in the field that you're selecting. And lastly, your existing knowledge base. Because if your objectives don't align, you wouldn't want to go ahead. And if you don't have much of an interest, it would be quite difficult to continue. But if your existing knowledge is lacking, that's all right. Because if you're going on the right track, you'll eventually gain that knowledge on the way.
I absolutely agree with everything Nandika said. And just a couple more points to add. Generally, regarding the streams, there are 2 criteria that you should be considering. The first one being difficulty, and the second one being the overall selection rate. Now, regarding difficulty, what I really mean here is how foreign are the concepts to you, how much data would be available for the stream that you're selecting, because ultimately this is a research-based competition. Regarding the selection rate, really it's just trying to gauge how likely would other teams be to pick the stream, because the more niche a stream is, the easier it is for you to shine through, which is something we believe was the case for us as well. With the niche stream and a good amount of research, we were really able to shine through in the stream of famous architecture.
When it comes to a case competition like EY CAFTA, where the slide requirement is upwards of 15 to 20, you need to focus a lot on both the content and the visual appeal for it to be even remotely considered a good case study, first of all. Now, under here, we can look at 3 aspects. One is the content, the second is the presentation, and thirdly, the delivery. In terms of the content, it's more research heavy, and you will focus a lot on going through multiple reports, skimming through various articles, news pieces, and condensing that into a visually appealing deck across the number of slides you have. So within this, you'd also want to focus a lot on the kinds of content that you find within EY. EY has countless teams all doing all kinds of research, so you can leverage a lot of things they already have because that would feel familiar. You can't truly use anything that is too external because you would want to focus on what EY has to ensure that they know what we're talking about in that industry. Aside from that, you want to focus a lot on the data that you get from credible sources, emphasis on the credibleness, and ensure that you mention the sources clearly, whether it's in the footer or in the appendix.
Absolutely. It's really, really important to justify any kind of point that you're making with some kind of data point attached to it or some credible source attached to it. Completely agree with everything Nandika said. Talking a bit more about the presentation side of things, the first thing I want to mention here is the color scheme. As Nandika mentioned, we want to be leveraging a lot of things that EY has been doing, and one of the more prominent things would be their color scheme that immediately gives your presentation a sense of familiarity, which goes a really, really long way when you have to go through 15 to 20 slides with your judges. The next thing would be in your presentation to have an insights focus. What I mean by that is every single visual that you have, every single slide that you have, the outcome or the reason or the so what of that slide should be apparent or very, very obvious to the judges. The third thing that goes here would be breaking the monotony. This also kind of ties into what Nandika said. It's a very, very long deck, 15 to 20 slides. A good visual appeal to the deck, where you're not reusing your visuals too much, but you're keeping it fresh with every single slide, would go a long way in keeping the judges engaged throughout your presentation. Another thing that ties into this point would be the kind of visuals you use. So you want to be using a diverse types of graphs. So for example, I remember we use football charts, bar charts, pie charts, and even made some of our own custom visuals. Like I remember we had a Venn diagram that the judges really appreciated. So you want to be doing a lot of those things to keep the presentation fresh and engaging. Talking a bit about the delivery, specifically about the script, it's necessary to have a script going beforehand. This is a really, really long deck once again. And if you don't have a script ready beforehand, you might fumble things, and there's a strict time limit as well. So it's important to be ready beforehand. Regarding what you do say, actually, it's necessary to have an impact or insights focus here as well, where you lead with the impact and then you tell what the background explanation of it is. Because ultimately, there's a lot of research emphasis, so there's not a whole lot of use telling what the background work was.
And the hygiene factors go without saying. Firstly, have a stable internet connection because it is an online presentation. And do ensure that you're well suited in formals. One of the main things that differentiated us from the other teams was that we had our intentions clear from the beginning and throughout. We knew that this was a more research report focused case competition. Keeping that in mind, we wanted each slide, each element to be self-explanatory. This meant that we would ensure that nothing would have to be explained during our delivery. And this also meant that anytime we presented, we had to make it engaging so that every time the next slide showed up, it would be something fresh, but something informative and something that didn't need proper elaboration.
Absolutely. Adding on to that, in terms of hygiene, I think two things that we really got right was the first one being a virtual background. So for this competition, we made a custom virtual background that the judges had really appreciated because it showed that we put in thought regarding the competition. The second thing we did right was that we finished within the time limit. The judges appreciated this as well because the previous couple of teams had failed to do so. Given that there's a huge number of slides and it's a very short time limit, you will need good coordination with your teammate as well as with your own thoughts. But of course, that just goes back to the importance of having the script ready beforehand. Of course, some perks of this competition, if you make it to the top 5, every single team in the top 5 gets a live project opportunity with EY. And if you are lucky enough and skilled enough to be the winner, then you are rewarded with an Amazon Echo, an internship opportunity at EY, as well as a complete scholarship on the CAFTA course.
Aside from selecting your stream wisely, the other top advice that we would like to give you is when it comes to the amount of words that you use throughout your deck. Because you want to treat each word like it's gold and you want to use it sparingly. Ensure that everything that's conveyed does not lead to monotony, but it leads to value addition for both your deck and for the person reading it. Aside from that, when it comes to AI, during our time, it was in its nascent stages of development. But over the last few months, where we've done quite a few other case competitions, we've learned to leverage AI to the fullest. It can now condense 40, 50-page reports into just 200 words or so. With all of those benefits, we would say use it wisely.
But there's a big caveat that I'd like to mention to what Nandika just said. With AI, it can be quite easy to fall into the trap where delegating all of your thinking to the AI itself, but that's really not something you should be doing. All the intellectual heavy lifting in terms of structuring, coming up with the deck structure, the kind of points you want to be making should be done by you. While let's say the fine print can be, or all the menial work like extracting data can be done with the AI. I believe that is the optimal way of using AI.
If you'd like any specific suggestions or have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And
Best
best wishes.